For much of my life, learning was an obligation. It was that activity associated with school, exams, assignments with tight deadlines, and the constant fear of failure. Knowledge seemed technical, distant, almost always imposed from the outside in. I viewed studying as a means to an end, a diploma, a job, a promotion, but never as a pleasure in itself. It felt like carrying a heavy backpack, necessary but exhausting. Until, in a moment of mental fatigue, questioning why everything felt so empty, I discovered a simple trick that completely reconfigured my relationship with learning. That trick was to start asking myself, why does this matter to me? It may not seem like much at first, but this question was revolutionary. It took me out of autopilot. It made me realize that I was learning to please others, to meet external expectations, and I rarely asked myself what I truly wanted to understand. When I began to seek that answer within myself, something changed. Knowledge gained color, shape, and soul. I remember well the first time I consciously applied this question. I was reading about neuroplasticity, a topic that had previously seemed technical and impersonal to me. But that day, in front of that page, I asked myself, why does this matter to me? And the answer came like a snap, because I wanted to change my mental habits. I wanted to understand why I procrastinated so much, why I got easily distracted, why I felt I wasn't living up to my potential. Suddenly, that content gained purpose. What was once distant became intimate. And that's when real learning happened. I spent hours reading, taking notes, watching videos, cross-referencing information, making connections. It was no longer a mandatory task. It was a pleasurable dive, a rediscovery of myself. For the first time, studying wasn't about memorizing, it was about transforming. It was only later that I understood what lay behind this phenomenon, the power of intrinsic motivation. When we connect what we learn to an inner desire, a personal need, or even an emotion, the brain responds differently. It releases dopamine, the neurotransmitter linked to pleasure and reward. And this creates a cycle of positive feedback. The more you learn something you feel is relevant, the more pleasure you experience. And the more pleasure you feel, the more you want to continue learning. Realizing this changed my life. I began to apply the question, why does this matter to me, to everything? The books I chose, the videos I watched, the conversations I had, even on topics that had previously bored me deeply. And surprisingly, I started to enjoy subjects I never imagined I would. Economics, philosophy, history, neuroscience, all began to make sense when I discovered my why. Learning then ceased to be a burden and became an act of freedom. And today, more than seeking answers, I have learned to love the questions, because they ignite the spark. They connect us to something greater than mere memorization, the possibility of evolving from within. This small trick, so simple, taught me something profound. True learning begins when we stop studying only for the world and start studying for ourselves. But it didn't stop there. Over time, this simple question, why does this matter to me, began to infiltrate every area of my life. If I needed to learn something new for work, it was no longer just about completing a task or acquiring a skill. I paused and reflected, how can this make my routine easier? How can I apply this knowledge to solve a concrete problem? The search for meaning gave purpose to the effort. Even in more abstract subjects like philosophy, the dynamic was the same. I would ask myself, what does this idea say about my existence? How can it help me confront my insecurities, my silent doubts? The answer didn't always come immediately. Sometimes it would come weeks later in a conversation, in a dream, or in a moment of silence. But the simple act of seeking personal meaning transformed the learning into something irresistible, almost sacred. It was then that I understood. Knowledge is an invitation to transformation. It is not limited to a mere accumulation of data. It broadens horizons, sharpens perceptions, humanizes. It's like a lens that not only reveals the world, but also reveals ourselves. And it's addictive. A type of addiction that does not exhaust, but renews, that does not distance, but brings closer, that does not imprison, but liberates. Learning became for me a true spiritual journey. Each book read, each documentary watched, each podcast listened to, or sincere conversation transformed into a key capable of unlocking internal doors that were previously unknown. And the more I learned, the clearer the immense ocean of what I still did not know became. Ignorance, which once embarrassed me, became a source of curiosity, a fertile field of possibilities. Of course, not everything is easy. Truly learning requires radical humility. It is recognizing that our certainties are often illusory, that changing one's mind is not a sign of weakness, but of growth, that true knowledge is always unfinished. But, paradoxically, even this became part of the pleasure, the ecstasy of deconstructing old ideas and reconstructing them with greater wisdom. And this small mental practice, this seemingly naive question, also protected me from one of the greatest ills of the digital age: excess. We are surrounded by stimuli, data, opinions, constant notifications. It's easy to become collectors of disconnected information, accumulators of superficiality. But by asking myself, why does this matter to me? I filter. I choose. I deepen. Learning becomes integrated instead of scattered. It ceases to be mere consumption and transforms into real growth. Knowledge, when truly embraced, is not an adornment. It is a mirror, a bridge, and a remedy. It makes me more human. If I could give one piece of advice to anyone who feels lazy about studying, blocked when reading, or discouraged about growing, I would say, don't start by asking, what should I learn? Start by asking, why does this matter to me? It seems simple, but this shift in questioning changes everything. Because the transformative learning is not imposed from the outside in. It comes from within, from the legitimate desire to understand, to find meaning, to live more deeply. Knowledge is scattered everywhere in the pages of books, in the mistakes we make, in casual conversations, in silences full of meaning. But it only sticks with us when it finds fertile ground, when it touches something that already pulses within us, even if dormant, when it resonates with that secret question that lives in our chest, which sometimes we can't even articulate. That's how I learned that there are no boring topics. There are only true purposes lacking. Physics gains color when we want to understand the universe that surrounds us. History ceases to be dead dates and transforms into a mirror reflecting the pains and victories of humanity. Mathematics becomes poetry when we seek the hidden patterns that outline the beauty of chaos. If you still see studying as a burden, try this small detour. Allow yourself to love knowledge. Give yourself the right to be enchanted by questions, to seek meaning before chasing grades. Put aside obligation and embrace curiosity. You might discover, as I did, that there is a profound, almost sacred pleasure in knowing a pleasure that cannot be explained, only felt. And it was with a question as simple yet powerful as this that I began to walk down this path. Why does this matter to me? The answer, gradually, led me to build the healthiest addiction I've ever had, an addiction to grow, to understand, to transform myself, an addiction to knowledge. And once you taste that flavor, it's impossible not to desire the next discovery. In the end, I learned that learning is, above all, an act of love for oneself, for others, for life. Today, I can say with serenity and passion, I am addicted to knowledge, but not out of intellectual vanity, nor out of a desire to accumulate titles, impress others, or feel superior. None of that. I am addicted because I discovered something that changed my life. Learning heals me, strengthens me, connects me to the world, and tunes me with the essence of others.